At approximately 11:15 p.m. on Wednesday, December 9, a Lamarck police officer was involved in a fatal shooting of an African-American male in the 1000 block of Purtle Street in Lamarck. The officer was responding to a report that the individual had been sighted in the area. This individual had been identified as a person of interest in an ongoing investigation related to recent shootings in Lamarck. We have reason to believe the individual was armed. There were firearms recovered at the scene. The Lamarck City Council, the Lamarck Police Department, and the vast majority of our citizens want the same thing: a peaceful, safe community. Speaking more generally, the Lamarck Police Department has received recently reports of shots fired in the evenings in limited areas, and some recent neighborhood property damage has been reported, but that activity is not widespread and involves a small number of people. Ongoing investigations and partnerships with federal agencies have resulted in recent arrests and seizures of illegal firearms in Lamarck, and the work continues. The Lamarck Police Department has identified hotspots for increased monitoring, has issued warrants, and is responding with the tools available. The safety and welfare of the citizens of Lamarck is our primary concern. Per the Lamarck Police Department policy, the officer will be placed on administrative leave during the investigation. The Galveston County Sheriff's Office is conducting an independent investigation. We will continue to be as transparent as we can, but we also have a responsibility to protect the integrity of the investigation. No additional information about the officer or the deceased individual can be shared at this time. We encourage citizens to be calm and continue to be vigilant. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Mayor Pro Tem Keith Bell.
Good morning. I'm Mayor Pro Tem Keith Bell, Mayor Pro Tem of the City of Lamarck. I'm also the council representative from the area in which the shooting took place. And certainly, we ought to start off by saying that this is a sad day in our city. It's a tragedy. Anytime that any life is lost unexpectedly, we ought to consider that a tragedy. Certainly, it's a tragedy for the family of this young man. I know this young man. I knew this young man. He went to one of my child care facilities, and so I have intimate knowledge with his family. And I definitely want to indicate to us that this is a tragedy for this family. They have lost a young man unexpectedly. But I wanted to also say that this is a tragedy for our community as well. For I don't believe that there is any member of our community that would not call this a tragedy simply because a young person in our community, in our city, has lost their life unexpectedly. All of us have children and grandchildren, sisters and brothers. And so if we could imagine together with this family what it would feel like for a young person to lose their life unexpectedly, we would be able to understand how this is a tragedy for them. But also this is a tragedy for our law enforcement community, because I believe that the police department, our police department, and the vast majority of its members and the members of police departments all over this country, I don't believe that they wake up in the morning deciding that they want to take the life of any person, whether it does not matter the circumstances that surround that shooting. And so I believe in my heart that it's a tragedy for our law enforcement community as well. I believe that they are, as we are, mourning the loss of life of this young man, regardless of the circumstances. And so as we understand that this is a threefold tragedy, we might be able to identify with each other in this moment, that it is definitely a sad day in our community. So what we have to do now is we have to grieve together as a community. We have to understand that this is something that none of us wanted. And in that grieving process, we might allow for space and time for those government entities that will investigate this shooting and this incident we have to give them the space and time to complete their investigation. And we as citizens, as members of this community, have to trust that process. We have to trust that process. We are not in control of that process, but that process has to take place so that transparency can prevail, so that the truth can come out, and that we as a community can move from the stage of mourning and grief into the stage of analysis, understanding, and activism. There will be a time for us in this community, wherever we are in this community, there will be a time for us to verify the process that we're trusting. There will be a time for us to be able to ask questions about the findings of the investigation, to analyze the findings, to evaluate, to observe, to debate. There will be a time for that, and I promise you, as a leader in this community, that I will make sure that the transparency we need to understand and analyze will be brought to this community, and I will make sure that we have an opportunity to move forward after we find out what actually happened, to make our police department an even better police department, because that's what happens in tragedies. We have certainly the sadness, but we also have the opportunity to become better. And so we just ask that our community be patient, trust this process, and trust those of us, your leaders, that will make sure that after this process, there will be a verification process led by our community, every member of our community, to ensure that this investigation was conducted thoroughly and truthfully and sufficiently, and that we have some sort of improvement from what has happened on last night. Thank you.
At this time, I would like to ask my good friend and colleague of many years, Reverend James Daniels, to come up and say some words. Reverend Daniels and I have been working together to improve this community for more years than I can think of. So at this point, I'd like Reverend Daniels to come up and say a few words to the community.
Thank you, Chief Jackson. And I want to thank our Mayor Pro Tem for eloquently stating the position that not only the city officials have taken, but also the community. I'm Reverend James Daniels. I am a co-chairman and founder of the West End Ministers and Leaders Alliance. And as Chief Jackson said, we have been working closely for a number of years, that when something like this would happen, that we would be able to come together and reason together. Not to preach a sermon, but this is what the Lord has told us to do, that we must come together and reason together. Now, this is a tragedy. And as Mayor Pro Tem Bell said, it's not just a tragedy for the family of this young man, but it's also a tragedy for the city of Lamarck and for the police department. I too do not believe that police officers just wake up in the morning and think about who they can go out and kill that day. I don't believe that. Another thing that I don't believe, and that is that if we as a community demand that our people get due process, and I wish that everyone would listen to this, then we too, as a community, we must allow the police officer, whoever he is, to get due process. This and only this will bring the kind of continuity and unity that we are working toward. I would feel very badly if my community, which I've been a part of for 72 years, would have been asking for due process for our own and not want to see the police and the police department to get their due process, to get their day in court, to get their investigation, to find out what happened. Now, we are in this early, and as you all know, these are trying times. But we're going to need every individual in this city, in this surrounding area that believes in the rule of law, but also to believe in the rights of every individual to have their day in court and to have due process. We are asking that they would unite with us in this effort. One of the main things that we talk about all the time is innocent until proven guilty. And now it's time for the community to exert this and to show this, that whoever this individual, this officer may be, he is innocent until proven guilty. Now, we want to let the mother and the family know that the West End Ministers Alliance is here for them. We're here for her, and that, as Mayor Pro Tem Bell said, we're going to make sure, and I give you all this promise today, that we're going to make sure in the ability to be transparent. But because I've been working with Chief Jackson for a number of years, I believe that he will do everything he can to be transparent. But we must understand that there are rules and regulations and investigations and things that we may not be able to get right now, but it's not saying that we won't get it one of these days. And so I'm again asking my community, wherever you are right now, let's be as big as we want them to be when the shoe is on the other foot. Let's give them the time, give them the space, give the law enforcement the opportunity to do the work that we expect them to do. And that is to investigate, come up with the solution, and then share that with us as a community so that we can move forward. And this is the beginning, this press conference. This is a beginning. Let us not leave here thinking that something is being kept away from you. Let us leave here with the knowledge and understanding that you have people that's going to stand for right and do the right thing and see that right is done. But in closing, the bottom line is we must be able to give the same respect to this police department as we expect for them to give to us. We're going to expect transparency, therefore we must be willing to be transparent too in issues that we know about and things of that nature. We must be willing to allow them to do what they're trained to do. So in closing, let's be big enough today, community. Let us show this country, let us show this world that Lamarck is a unified community and that we're going to do what's right, and we're going to see that right is done. Thank you.
Again,
Jackson, you had said that on this call that the Joshua, who was the man killed, was known to have weapons. But let me just ask this specifically: at any time did he brandish or fire a weapon when the officer engaged him?
as I said, that's part of the investigation that the Sheriff's Department is conducting, and we're not going to be commenting on that at this point due to the ongoing investigation.
Is your body cam video?
I'm sorry, can you say if he pointed a gun at any time? Like, usually during an officer-involved shooting, the officer says, I fear for my life. Can you comment anything on that, why he would shoot this man, other than, there was an ongoing investigation?
I do not want to jeopardize the integrity of the investigation. That is the Sheriff's Office's investigation. I'm not going to release any information at this point about that. That would jeopardize the investigation.
Was your officer wearing body cam?
Yes, he was.
Have you
Was it
taken a look at it?
Yes.
And what, did you see what it showed?
I have watched the body camera video.
And what did you see?
I have watched. I'm not going to be discussing anything that was on the body camera. That is part of the investigation.
Will you be releasing footage from the body camera?
Eventually, yes, the body camera video will be released, but it is part of the investigation, and it is not. It's not going to be released at this point.
Do you think your officer acted within what he's allowed to do?
Again, that's part of the investigation. I'm not going to make any comments right now. The investigation is very new. We're in the preliminary stages of it.
We talked to a neighbor on the street, and she was just talking a lot about like what she heard. Obviously, so we want a very balanced story. She said that she believes that this young man was shot in the back. Can you tell us where on his body he was shot?
I cannot, not at this point.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, that is part of the Sheriff's Office investigation, and I do not want to jeopardize the integrity of it.
Can you tell us the race of the officer, since you told us the race of the man who was shot and killed?
Not at.
I mean, you released the race of the man.
No. Not at this point. I do not want to release any identifying information about the officer that was involved.
And why would you release the race of the man who was killed, but not the race of the officer?
It is a very. It's honestly a very important subject in our community at this point.
Yeah.
That's
Do you
why.
believe it's not applicable?
If it's an important subject, why not reveal that?
At this point. Okay. Thank you.
Here's the deal. Whomever this officer is a representative of the Lamarck Police Department, who are representatives of the city of Lamarck, who are representatives of the citizens of Lamarck. And so the investigation targets the Lamarck Police Department. The investigation will be forwarded to the city of Lamarck, and the information will be dispersed to the citizens of Lamarck. And so that's why we believe that we want to keep this focus on our police department and not on the race of the officer. It's more important for us that our police department be transparent in their actions in totality than it is for us to delineate what race this officer was. It was important for us to delineate what race the victim was because we want to be as transparent as possible to our community members, and we understand that this is a sensitive subject in our country. Young African American men who have lost their life unexpectedly, many times in incidents that involve police officers. So in the effort to be transparent in that way, we disclose the race of the victim. But let's be sure to understand that this falls at the feet of the city of Lamarck and our actions and our activities as they associate themselves with this incident. And that is the most important part of this investigation, and that's the part that we intend to focus on.
But Mayor Pro Tem, you say you want to be transparent. This is a sensitive subject for the country. You start off a press conference saying African American male known to have weapons, part of active investigation, without giving out an identity, with the family's already released. We're not asking for the identity of the officer. But if it is important to release the racial information of the person killed, why is it not as important to release the information? If you say it's going to be transparent, this is a very generic thing. An individual officer took an action. Why not release that information? That's the question to ask.
Because the individual officer took an action on behalf of the Lamarck Police Department, which serves the city of Lamarck, and that is the most important. If we begin to break this issue down in effort to what we believe would be to achieve transparency, we're not, in my opinion, actually achieving transparency, because the transparency that we need to achieve is to scrutinize the actions of our police department as a whole. If we can scrutinize the actions of our police department as a whole and understand them, then we might be able to get to a higher and more important level of transparency than we would by just dividing whether or not this officer was purple or green or tall or short. That has at this point in this investigation, I believe, and I'm not a police officer, the bigger part of this is to offer our condolences to this family who has lost a young person, to offer our comfort to a community, an entire Lamarck community, not just a neighborhood, not just a certain demographic, but every member of this city that calls this city home. We want to comfort them and let them know that we share in their grief. We want to let them know that our police department shares in their grief. And we also want to articulate that we will not stop until we get to the bottom of every action that has taken place as it relates to this incident. And that's more important. It's more important for us in this city to understand what we need to either continue doing as a police department or what we need to change about the way that we police our community than it is to say the officer involved was green, purple, black, or brown. Because at the end of the day, the officer involved was representing an entire city. And for us, that's more important than the race or ethnicity of the officer at this time.
You do understand most people in the community are not going to buy that.
And with all due respect, we've been covering millions of people marching, holding up signs that say Black Lives Matter. This is relevant right now. I've covered so many officer-involved shootings. I have to say, I've never, ever, at the beginning of an investigation, I've never heard of a department withholding the race of the officer. We're not asking about the name, his years of service. That just seems like standard transparency in 2020.
I understand that. I understand where both of you all are coming from.
It's not me. I mean, it's our viewers.
Right. No. I totally understand where we're coming from. But because we are in the midst of an investigation, and because this investigation has to be completed in a certain fashion and form, and because we are in a small community, and because the tensions are high, we want to make sure that we are putting our focus. I get what you're saying about the community. But it is in our best interest. We have met this morning, and we believe it's in our best interest to make sure that the entire police department take the responsibility of what did or did not happen as it relates to this young man.
Mayor Pro Tem, that's just not accurate.
Thank you very much.
You come out here, you name the suspect information.
I didn't do that.
The city did. You're up here speaking too. You've made this a bigger issue by not saying it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's because
other police departments that do issue that information.
we understand where you all are coming from. We've met this morning. We believe that it's in the best interest of the city of Lamarck and of the citizens of Lamarck to allow this investigation to be completed. The race and the name of this officer will be revealed at the end of this investigation.
Whoa.
What would happen if you shared it? What are you afraid of?
Hold on, Chief. Here's the deal. You all have been invited to a press conference, and the press conference was to speak about what happened to a young man who lost his life unexpectedly. And we are now moving this press conference into a place that we are taking the focus off of the young man who lost his life. Can we get through the process of understanding exactly what happened to this young man before we get into the process of the race and the record of the officer. Let's understand exactly what happened first. Give us that space and that time. I appreciate.
Very little information
I appreciate what you're saying. If this is the only question that we're going to continue to have,
No,
then
I have a separate question. Can
yes.
we talk about use of force policy? Let's talk about what your officers are trained in when it comes to use of force and when to use.
That's not my question. We'll let Chief Jackson answer that.
The officers, we have a use of force policy at the station that the officers are expected to comply with. As far as how it applies to this incident, we're not going to be discussing that. So if there are not any questions that have not already been asked, we're going to go ahead and end this today. Thank you.
Use deadly force. That
Thank
doesn't
you.
apply to this incident.
Thank you very much. I appreciate everybody for coming out today. Thank you.